It's no surprise that violent rhetoric will increase with Trump calling for it from his base, as well as his base being extremely cult-like and will do anything to protect Trump. Uh, that will mean that these people will become violent, which is why there needs to be a crackdown on the right-wing extremism.
After the latest indictment of former President Trump, violent rhetoric has been escalating in online forums and in far-right militia groups. This, coupled with heated and combative messaging from Trump and his Republican allies, has extremism watchers on high alert. Following all of this closely is Jeff Sharlet. He's a professor at Dartmouth College, and his new book, The Undertow: Scenes from a Slow Civil War, chronicles the rise of right-wing extremism over the last decade. Jeff Sharlet, welcome back to the NewsHour. I'd like to ask for your help in translating some of the response we've seen from some Republicans after the indictment of former President Trump. This in particular from a congressman, from Clay Higgins of Louisiana. If you take a look at this tweet, he said this, quote, President Trump said he has, quote, been summoned to appear at the federal courthouse in Miami on Tuesday at 3 p.m. This is a perimeter probe from the oppressors. Hold. Our POTUS has this. Buckle up. 150K, know your bridges, rock steady calm. That is all.
What? Well, this dude thinks that right-wingers are the oppressed group, acting like left-wingers are oppressing them, which is funny because it's right-wingers that are passing laws making it harder for people on the left wing to exist. Uh, Buckle up, 150K, know your bridges. What is that supposed to mean?
Jeff Sharlet, when you read that, can you help us understand what is he talking about here and why did it catch your attention?
Because it's such a specific call to prepare for battle. A perimeter probe he's saying that the oppressors, by which he sometimes refers to the cabal or even Leviathan, these are QAnon terms for the federal government, is testing the strength of the real people. Our POTUS, a term he's been using for several years, is the real POTUS. He believes Trump is the real president.
Oh, no wonder he had the R in front of POTUS. Wow, why are right-wingers so freaking crazy? Well, that could be easily explained because they're highly religious and a lot of them are highly undereducated. But this is wild.
Buckle up, obviously, is get ready. But 150K, I had to do some research. That's 1 to 50,000, the ratio, the scale of military grade maps. Know your bridges, I was familiar with, is militia speak for understand the points of attack. Literally, know the bridges that you can seize and hold and stop federal forces from coming in.
So this dude is literally calling for the right-wing groups to an attack on the government because Trump is being indicted.
Why
It's
is
militia.
why is it concerning for you to see this kind of language? How surprising is it to see this kind of language from a sitting member of Congress?
Well, he's not just a sitting member of Congress. He has both militia credibility and he's also been elevated by his party to a chair of the Border Security Subcommittee on the Homeland Security Committee. He identifies himself as a member of.
Why aren't people like this charged for their violent rhetoric? I mean, it was like during the January 6th attack. You had a bunch of politicians that supported the attack on the Capitol. A lot of people in Congress, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Mo Brooks, but nothing happened to those people. They still got their positions of power, and they're still able to call for another attack on the government.
A militia movement called the Three Percenter. He first did so publicly, at least, to speaking to a gas lobbyist. Since then, he's been doubling down. He's appeared with the Oath Keepers, whose leader, of course, is now serving 18 years. And even since that tweet, he said there are 3% solutions to the indictments.
He's not alone in using some of this military or violent references in his language. We've had a congressman from Arizona, Andy Biggs, who tweeted, "We have now reached a war phase." The failed Arizona gubernatorial candidate Kerry Lake was speaking recently and said, "If you want to get to President Trump, you're going to have to go through me and 75 million Americans like me, and most of us are card-carrying members of the NRA." Jeff, when you listen
These people honestly don't care about law and order because if they did, they wouldn't want to, attack the government for a person that they worship as a god for getting in trouble for breaking the law.
listen to all of this, do you believe there is a real threat of more political violence around Mr. Trump's indictment, or really as soon as tomorrow when he's arraigned?
My guess is that there's not going to be a January 6th-like event tomorrow in Miami, precisely because so many militia members have been arrested. They're afraid of infiltration. They're afraid of the FBI, but they've moved to a different kind of action. I think the other risk is the way that this language incites those whom we think of as lone wolves. The mass shooters who manifesto after manifesto refer to this kind of political rhetoric and tell each other to go forward, to carry the fight on.
Tell me more about that. From what we know about how this rise of domestic extremism has occurred, it doesn't seem like it takes elaborate planning or a lot of group effort. As you mentioned, it's often an individual with a set of grievances who is motivated in some way by language like this. Is that what we're seeing as the trend?
Yeah, although I would question the sort of individual. When you look at the manifestos of so many of the politically motivated mass killers, they oftentimes cut and paste from the previous one. They refer to the previous one. They say that this is part of a long struggle. They see themselves as soldiers in a war. And of course, then you've got other people like General Mike Flynn, who, maybe in mainstream world is considered ridiculous, but still holds this status as Trump's first national security advisor, and as a man we may see in power again if Trump returns, calling for open war.
So what would it take to stamp out this kind of rhetoric? All of it is being done in defense of and in support of, at this moment, former President Trump. If he were to come out and unequivocally say there's no room for political violence in this country, would that end it?
No, and after 7 years, are we really expecting that to happen? Maybe now this Trump's presidential moment at last. I don't think it would, though, because the movement goes, Trumpism is bigger than Trump. Trump is the avatar, and he's made himself the martyr of the movement. But the movement, in the minds of men like Clay Higgins, in the minds of those who even see Trump as soft for not going into open combat, is larger than them. The anger that Trump invokes, he's trying to keep up. In a Saturday night speech, he says, either they destroy us or we destroy them. And I don't think he's speaking metaphorically anymore.
So for those who believe in small d democratic ideals, what's the appropriate way to handle these calls for political violence? Do we in the media risk amplifying them by covering them at all?
I think look, pretending they're not there isn't going to work. It's a big part of the American landscape. What we can do, we can't fact check a myth. This is an argument that I make. We can't fact check a myth, but we can interpret it. And we can say, here's what's happening, and here's how we organize. The other thing we can do, of course, is support the rule of law. What's happening in Miami tomorrow is the most important part of this work. We proceed with the work of democracy. We proceed with the work of the rule of law. And those of us in the press pay attention, interpret, and call out what it is. We've got to get away from saying, this is not conservative rhetoric. This is, and I'll use the F word, this is fascist rhetoric. This is violent rhetoric, and we've got to name it as such.
Yeah, that is true. That is something I talked about before, or at least said. Uh, we got to call out the right wing for what they are, and that is fascism, and then that they're fascist. Because if we pretend otherwise, it just allows for the fascist people to grow in power and cause, you know, problems in the United States like what they have already started doing and been doing for quite a while now.
That is Jeff Sharlet, professor at Dartmouth